The rain on New Terran fell in sheets, washing the mining colony's grime into gutters that glowed faintly blue from mineral runoff. Commander Eliza Chen stood at perfect attention in her crisp Imperial uniform, face impassive as required of an officer of her rank. Inside, her heart hammered against her ribs like a caged animal. Across the plaza, flanked by 4 XL foreign guards in gleaming exo-armor, her brother Marcus knelt with his head bowed. The crime report scrolled across the public view screens: possession of banned Earth literature, correspondence with known dissidents, suspicion of resistance sympathies. Governor Thexkull, his scaled skin iridescent in the artificial lighting, read the charges in the clicking, multi-toned language of the Empire. The translator drones hovering above the crowd conveyed his words in flat, emotionless standard. The sentence is death, to be carried out immediately as a reminder that the Emperor's law applies equally to all subjects, regardless of their connections. Eliza's fingers twitched at her side. As the only human to achieve officer rank in the Imperial fleet through combat skills that had impressed even the XL Forans, she could have requested mercy. But that would have meant the end of her career. And with it, her access to Imperial systems. Marcus had made her promise, during their last clandestine meeting, that she would not intervene, no matter what happened. "Stay where you are," he had whispered. "We need you there." The execution was quick, at least. The XL Forans were nothing if not efficient. A single energy pulse that left no mark, just her brother's body slumping forward onto the rain-slicked pavement. The crowd, mostly humans with a scattering of other subjugated species, dispersed silently, eyes downcast. Eliza maintained her posture until the plaza emptied, then returned to her quarters in the Imperial compound. She moved through her evening routine mechanically, checking reports, reviewing security protocols, preparing for the next day's inspection of the mining operations. At precisely 200 hours, when the night shift changes created a 3-minute gap in surveillance, she slipped into the command center using the access code she had memorized months ago. Her fingers flew across the terminal, bypassing security protocols with techniques learned from resistance hackers she had deliberately failed to capture during previous missions. The classified files opened before her. Operation Terminus. Stomach clenching, she scanned the documents detailing the Empire's plan to extract Earth's remaining resources using experimental technology that would render the human homeworld uninhabitable within months. Billions would die in the name of Imperial efficiency. "This ends now," she whispered, downloading the files to a quantum crystal barely larger than her thumbnail. The sabotage was simple, a power surge in the primary grid that would trigger emergency protocols, creating confusion without causing casualties. As alarms blared and emergency lighting bathed the corridors in crimson, Eliza moved swiftly to the private hangar, where Governor Thexkull's personal scout ship awaited. The guards fell without raising alarm, victims of the hand-to-hand combat techniques she had mastered to earn her rank. The ship's engines hummed to life under her command, security systems recognizing her officer codes before she overrode them. As the hangar doors opened, plasma cannons on the perimeter defenses swiveled toward her. Eliza punched the throttle, the scout ship screaming into the night sky, trailing fire like a comet. Breaking atmosphere, she paused only long enough to set coordinates for the rumored resistance stronghold in the outer rim. Behind her, New Terran shrank to a pinpoint of light among countless stars. Ahead lay only uncertainty and hope. Commander Eliza Chen, decorated Imperial officer, was now the most wanted fugitive in the galaxy. Cronus 7 appeared in Eliza's view screen as a rust-colored sphere wrapped in bands of toxic yellow clouds. Already, 3 Imperial pursuit drones had locked onto her trajectory, their signals pulsing with increasing urgency as they closed the distance. "Not today," she muttered, plunging the stolen scout ship into the planet's turbulent atmosphere at an angle steep enough to make the hull scream. Warning lights flashed across the control panel as external temperature sensors spiked into the red. The crash landing destroyed half a shipyard of smugglers' vessels and sent plumes of smoke visible for kilometers. Eliza dragged herself from the wreckage, blood streaming from a gash above her eye, and disappeared into the maze-like spaceport before local security forces arrived. By nightfall, her face was on every view screen in the sprawling outpost, the bounty high enough to tempt even the most cautious mercenary. She slipped into the shadows of a grimy bar called the Broken Thruster, where species from a dozen worlds hunched over drinks potent enough to bypass most biological safeguards. "You're bleeding on my table," said a voice from the darkness of the booth. Eliza's hand moved to her sidearm. "That's my business. When Imperial agents swarm this place in about 20 minutes, it becomes everyone's business." The figure leaned forward, revealing a haggard human face with eyes that had seen too much. "Jackson Reed. And before you shoot me, I'm the only reason you weren't arrested the minute you walked in here." Recognition dawned. "The terraformer. Your research was required study at the Academy." Jackson's laugh was hollow. "Was it? Did they teach you how the Empire turned my atmospheric stabilizers into weapons that rendered 3 inhabited planets uninhabitable in under a week?" Before Eliza could respond, the bar's entrance slammed open. Imperial security forces flooded in, weapon scopes painting red dots across the patrons. "Back exit," Jackson hissed, overturning the table as plasma fire erupted through the room. They fled through narrow maintenance tunnels, the sounds of pursuit echoing behind them. Emerging into a dimly lit alley, they stumbled upon a scene that made Eliza freeze. 3 XL foreigners in civilian clothing were beating a fourth, their victim already bloodied and crumpled against a waste container. "Species traitor," one snarled in accented standard, spreading lies about the homeland. Without thinking, Eliza drew her weapon and fired a warning shot that scorched the alley wall. Imperial Fleet Command. "Step away." The XL foreigners turned, confusion evident in their vertical pupilled eyes. The moment's hesitation was enough. Eliza moved with the enhanced speed that had earned her command position, disarming the first attacker and using his momentum to slam him into his companions. "Are you insane?" Jackson hissed, already backing away. "They'll report this. Then we'd better be gone." Eliza helped the injured XL foreign to his feet. "Can you walk?" "Why?" the alien asked, blood seeping from a gash along his cranial ridge. "Why would you help me?" Questions later. Eliza replied as distant sirens grew louder. "Right now, we need a ship." The XL foreign's eyes narrowed. "I am Kvex. I know where we can find transportation." They reached the shipyard just as the alert level elevated to maximum. A battered cargo hauler sat at the edge of the field, its engines already cycling. "My contact," Kvex explained. "He was to smuggle me off-world tonight. The coordinates are already programmed." As they powered up the ship, the main port gates opened to admit a sleek Imperial command shuttle. Through the view screen, Eliza saw a tall XL foreign in elite black armor step onto the landing pad. "Executor Dravkor," she whispered, a chill running down her spine. "Someone important?" Jackson asked, frantically working the launch sequence. "Someone who knows how I think." Eliza took the controls, adding grimly, "and someone who once knew me very well." The cargo hauler lifted off in a storm of dust and debris, barely clearing the perimeter fence as energy weapons lit up the night sky behind them. The Imperial communications hub on Nexus Prime resembled a massive silver spire reaching toward the rust-colored sky. Eliza studied it through macrobinoculars from their vantage point 3 kilometers away, counting guard rotations and security checkpoints. "It's impossible," Jackson muttered beside her. "Even if we could get past the outer perimeter, the internal security systems would detect non-XL foreign biosignatures immediately. That's why we're not going in as ourselves." Eliza lowered the binoculars. "How's our 4th member doing with those credentials?" They returned to their hideout, an abandoned atmospheric monitoring station, where Maya Okoro hunched over salvaged equipment. The girl couldn't be older than 17, with close-cropped hair and eyes that held the haunted look of someone who had seen too much too young. "Almost done," Maya said without looking up. The maintenance worker IDs will get you through the first 3 layers of security. After that, you're on your own. She glanced at Kvex. His genetic signature should buy you a few minutes if you're discovered, but not if anyone checks his file too closely. Kvex adjusted the maintenance coveralls that barely fit his tall, lean frame. I am listed as killed during the uprising on Beatrix 4. It should be sufficient time. It has to be, Eliza said. The Ascension Day broadcast begins in 4 hours. It's our only chance to reach every screen in the Empire simultaneously. The plan was audacious in its simplicity. During the annual broadcast celebrating the Empire's founding, they would hijack the feed and show the evidence of Imperial atrocities Eliza had stolen from Muturan, along with data on the planned destruction of Earth. The Empire maintained control through information suppression. The truth was their weapon. They entered through the waste reclamation system, the one entry point with minimal bioscanners due to the variety of contaminants processed there. The maintenance credentials worked as planned, getting them through the outer levels. Jackson released his experimental nanobots, microscopic machines that looked like dust but would infiltrate the hub's systems and temporarily grant Maya remote access from their hideout. Unscheduled security sweep in Section 4. Kvex warned, reading an alert on a wall terminal. We need to divert. There's no time. Eliza checked her chronometer. The broadcast begins in 20 minutes. Kvex straightened to his full height, adjusting his uniform. Then I will create a diversion. You proceed to the control room. What are you doing? Jackson hissed. Being the Imperial I once was, Kvex strode purposefully toward the approaching security team. This is Inspector Kvex, Special Audit Division. Why was I not informed of this security sweep? His authoritative tone and genetic signature bought them precious minutes as Eliza and Jackson slipped past, racing toward the central control hub. At the final security checkpoint, Eliza moved with practiced efficiency, neutralizing 6 guards using combat techniques learned from the Empire itself. Jackson plugged a transmitter into the system. Maya. Now. In their hideout, Maya's fingers flew across her interface. I'm in. Uploading the footage now. Across 20,000 worlds, the benevolent face of the Supreme XL Foreign dissolved into images of labor camps where humans and other species worked until they collapsed. Research facilities where subjects underwent horrific experiments. And finally, the plans for Earth's systematic destruction, annotated in the Empire's own classification codes. 30 seconds until they traced the signal, Maya's voice warned through their comms. As they retreated, alarms blared throughout the facility. Jackson grabbed Eliza's arm. The hub's entering lockdown. They've initiated the self-destruct sequence. That wasn't part of the plan. Eliza's mind raced. Kvex, get to extraction point Beta. We're coming out hot. They fled through maintenance corridors now filling with emergency response teams. In the landing bay, Kvex had already commandeered an Imperial shuttle, its engines glowing blue with pre-launch sequences. As they lifted off, the communications hub imploded, collapsing in on itself like a dying star. The shockwave buffeted their shuttle, nearly sending them crashing back to the surface. We did it, Jackson whispered as they broke atmosphere. The whole Empire saw the truth. On their comm channel, Maya's excited voice came through. It's working. I'm seeing reports of demonstrations on 27 worlds already. Wait, incoming transmission on all frequencies. The shuttle's view screen filled with the face of Executor Dravkor, his expression coldly furious. Eliza Chen, you have just been upgraded from fugitive to enemy of the Empire. There will be nowhere in the galaxy you can hide. This I promise personally. Eliza met his gaze unflinchingly. I'm counting on it. The orbital bombardment of Narita Colony lasted 6 hours. From the ridge overlooking the settlement, Eliza watched through thermal imaging as Imperial dreadnoughts methodically reduced the city to ash. Punishment for being the first human colony to openly declare support for the resistance. We caused this, she whispered, lowering the binoculars. Jackson stood beside her, his face illuminated by the distant fires. The Empire caused this. We just exposed the truth. Tell that to the families down there. Eliza turned away as their transport hummed to life behind them. 3 weeks since the broadcast, and the Imperial response had been swift and merciless. Public executions filled the news feeds. Entire settlements disappeared overnight. And everywhere, their faces were displayed as the Empire's most wanted. Maya met them at the transport's ramp, her young face drawn with exhaustion from continuous hacking of Imperial networks. We have to leave. They've tracked our communications signature. It was their third emergency evacuation in 10 days. The pattern had become grimly familiar. Establish contact with newly formed resistance cells, provide tactical support, then flee before Imperial forces arrived. But this time felt different. The Empire was getting closer with each pursuit. Where's Key-Vex? Eliza scanned the area as they lifted off. Scouting the Zephyrium mines on Helios 9, Maya replied, already buried in her portable terminal. He thought his knowledge of Imperial mining operations might help us determine if we can disrupt their supply. Zephyrium, the rare mineral that powered everything from Imperial warships to the neural nets that maintained the Cell-Thorin's communication network. If they could somehow interrupt the supply. The ship's warning system blared. Maya's eyes widened. Imperial destroyers. They're locking weapons. Evasive pattern Delta. Eliza commanded, strapping into the pilot's seat. She pushed the transport into a steep dive, skimming just above the planet's atmosphere as plasma bolts streaked past. Maya, find us a blind spot. Working on it. The girl's fingers flew across her interface. There's a magnetic storm in Sector 7 that might mask our signature. They plunged into the storm, electrical discharges flashing across the viewports. When they emerged on the other side, the Imperial ships were nowhere on their scanners. That was too close, Jackson muttered. Maya's terminal chimed. Incoming transmission. It's using Key-Vex's encryption. The message was brief and encrypted twice over. Coordinates for a planet called Veilmine, officially designated uninhabitable due to its toxic atmosphere. 3 days later, they approached the planet cautiously. Its surface was shrouded in swirling violet clouds that their sensors couldn't penetrate. If we go down there, we're flying blind, Jackson warned. Key-Vex wouldn't send us into a trap, Eliza replied, though doubt edged her voice. She transmitted the recognition code on the specified frequency. For several tense minutes, there was no response. Then a narrow beam of light shot up from the surface, creating a visible pathway through the toxic clouds. Someone's expecting us, Maya whispered. They followed the light down, breaking through the cloud layer to find a vast expanse of ruins stretching to the horizon. Ancient structures of unknown design rose hundreds of meters into the air, their surfaces etched with symbols no human had ever documented. At the base of the largest structure, a small settlement had been established. Several ships of various designs were partially concealed among the ruins. As they landed, Key-Vex emerged from one of the structures, accompanied by representatives of at least 6 different species, all subjects of the Empire. "Welcome to Sanctuary," he said. "The Empire believes this planet is uninhabitable. Jackson's atmospheric filters should make it quite comfortable." Jackson examined the portable units Key-Vex indicated. "These are based on my original designs, but modified." "Who did this?" "Resistance cells have been forming across the galaxy since your broadcast," Key-Vex explained. "Many bring skills and resources. This will be our base of operations." Later that night, as Jackson worked to extend the breathable zone around the settlement, Maya burst into the command center they'd established in one of the ancient buildings. "Key-Vex's shuttle has gone dark," she reported, her voice tight. "His last transmission came from the Proxima mining belt. Then nothing." The Imperial broadcast appeared on all their screens without warning. Key-Vex kneeled before Executor Dravkor, chains binding his limbs. "The traitor has been captured," Dravkor announced. "His public execution will take place on the prison moon Tartarus in 7 days. Let this be a warning to all who defy the Empire. The transmission cut to an image of Eliza. We know you're watching, Commander Chen. Come for your friend and join him in execution. The command center erupted in argument, some insisting they couldn't risk everything for one individual, others arguing they couldn't abandon Kivex. Enough. Eliza's voice cut through the chaos. We don't leave anyone behind. Not ever. Tartarus loomed against the gas giant it orbited, a perfect obsidian sphere unmarred by windows or visible entrances. The prison moon had been constructed 10,000 years ago, its technology predating even the Empire itself. No prisoner had ever escaped. No rescue had ever succeeded. This is insanity, muttered a resistance fighter as their stolen Imperial supply freighter approached the security checkpoint. We're flying into the most secure Imperial facility in the galaxy. Inside the cargo hold, 50 of their best fighters waited in suspended animation, their life signs suppressed to register as prisoners in stasis. Maya's work on the false transponder codes had taken a week of sleepless nights, layering deception upon deception to get them this far. Eliza stood on the bridge in a stolen Imperial officer's uniform, her hair now platinum blonde, her features subtly altered by Jackson's chemical compounds. Remember, we only need 6 minutes. That's how long until the next security verification. The comms crackled. Supply vessel Hephaestus. Transmit authorization codes and manifest. Jackson, similarly disguised as a logistics officer, sent the carefully forged documents. For 30 seconds, silence stretched across the bridge. Then, codes accepted. Proceed to Docking Bay 7 for inspection. The massive prison sphere began to split open along an invisible seam, revealing a cavernous docking bay within. Their freighter glided inside, where rows of Imperial guards awaited. Standard inspection, the dock officer announced as they lowered the ramp. All crew to disembark for verification. Eliza descended first, back straight in perfect Imperial posture. Lieutenant Sorva, shipment of political prisoners from the Outer Rim. Category 3 security clearance. The inspection proceeded without incident until a guard paused at a scanner reading. There's an anomaly in Cargo Bay 2. Biosignatures aren't matching the manifest. Alarms began to blare throughout the facility. Eliza's hand moved to her concealed weapon, but before she could draw it, Maya's voice came through her hidden earpiece. Now. The girl shouted from her position on their backup ship, hiding in the gas giant's rings. Throughout Tartarus, systems began to fail in cascading sequence. Emergency lighting flickered on as primary power grids shut down. Security doors opened and closed at random. Automated defense turrets swiveled to target non-existent intruders. Go, Eliza shouted. The prisoners in the cargo hold burst from stasis, already armed. The element of surprise gave them the edge in the initial firefight, allowing them to secure the docking bay. Jackson released his microscopic mapping drones, which scattered throughout the facility, sending real-time blueprints to Eliza's neural implant. Level 7, high security sector. That's where they're keeping K-Vex and the political prisoners. Fighting their way deeper into the prison, they encountered increasingly desperate resistance. Imperial guards fell back to defensive positions, unprepared for an attack on what they had believed to be an impregnable fortress. We've got 15 minutes before their communications come back online, Maya warned through their comms. After that, the entire Imperial fleet will be alerted. At a junction leading to the high security sector, they encountered a full platoon of elite Imperial guards. The ensuing firefight seemed hopeless until resistance fighters from 3 different corridors converged, attacking from multiple angles. Eliza led a small team through the gap, pushing toward their objective. The high security sector was sealed by a massive door that even their weapons couldn't breach. Maya, we need a bypass, Eliza shouted over the sounds of battle behind them. Working on it, came the strained reply. Their security is adaptive. Every system I crack spawns 2 more protocols. Suddenly, the door began to open from the inside. They raised their weapons, ready for a new threat. only to see a tall, distinguished human man framed in the doorway. "I assumed that was you causing all this commotion, Commander," he said with a slight smile. "Admiral Kenzo, Earth Defense Force. Retired, obviously." Inside, they found not just HFY, but thousands of prisoners representing dozens of species. Many were political leaders, scientists, and strategists who had opposed the Empire and been presumed dead for years. As they began the evacuation, Eliza's neural implant alerted her to movement in the command sector. "I have to make a detour," she told Jackson. "Get everyone to the ships." In the prison's control center, she found Executor Dravkor waiting, his ceremonial blade drawn. "I knew you would come, Eliza." Their duel became a blur of impossible speed and precision. Former lovers, now deadly enemies. When she finally gained the upper hand, her blade at his throat, something unexpected happened. Instead of striking the killing blow, she used his own ceremonial blade to carve the resistance symbol into his chest plate. "Live with the shame," she whispered, "as we have lived with your oppression." In the hangars, the freed prisoners commandeered additional ships. What began as a rescue mission ended as the largest mass prison break in galactic history, with a fleet of stolen vessels jumping to hyperspace moments before the Empire's reinforcements arrived. Tartarus, the unbreakable symbol of imperial power, stood broken open like a cracked egg. The labyrinth asteroid field glowed faintly blue under the light of twin dwarf stars, its chaotic arrangement of spinning rocks creating a natural fortress where Imperial scanners could not penetrate. Within this celestial maze, the Resistance fleet had established their temporary headquarters aboard interconnected ships and hollowed-out asteroids. In what had once been the cargo hold of a mining vessel, Admiral Kenzo stood before a three-dimensional star map, his weathered face illuminated by the holographic display. "The Empire is vulnerable for the first time in centuries," he told the assembled Resistance leaders. "The Tartarus breakout has inspired uprisings on 37 worlds, but the XL Forans are adapting their strategy." Eliza studied the map, noting the increased Imperial fleet movements around key systems. "They're fortifying their resource production facilities, especially the Zephyrium refineries." "Which means we've identified their weakness," Kenzo replied. "But we need more intelligence, specifically about this facility." He highlighted a space station orbiting a barren world designated Erebus. HFY, still recovering from his imprisonment, leaned forward. "The Erebus facility is classified beyond even my former clearance level, but rumors existed among the Imperial elite. Experiments considered too sensitive for standard research channels. Intelligence from the freed prisoners had revealed unusual security protocols surrounding Erebus. Energy shields that could neutralize all electronic equipment, rendering advanced weapons useless. Whatever they're hiding, Maya observed, they fear it more than they fear us. 3 days later, a small team led by Eliza approached Erebus in a salvaged mining shuttle. Scans confirmed their worst fears. The entire facility was surrounded by a dampening field that would disable their technology upon entry. "Primitive weapons only," Eliza reminded the team as they donned environment suits. "And remember, this is reconnaissance. We identify what they're researching and extract if possible." The boarding went smoothly until they'd reached the main laboratory level. As the doors hissed open, they found themselves facing a squad of Imperial guards armed with energy spears, ancient weapons designed to function in dampening fields. The ensuing battle pushed them through the facility level by level, fighting with bladed weapons and projectile guns that hadn't been used in warfare for centuries. At the central chamber, they discovered rows of stasis pods containing hundreds of unconscious humans. "Dear stars," Jackson whispered, checking the nearest monitoring station. "They're alive." Maya found an isolated terminal still functioning on internal power. "These records go back decades. They've been abducting humans from frontier colonies, experimenting on their neural tissue." "But why?" Eliza scanned the chamber, counting at least 300 pods. Jackson's face paled as he read through the data. "It's an enzyme in human brain chemistry. When synthesized, it enhances cell-foreign telepathic abilities. They'd been harvesting it to maintain their hive mind command structure for their fleets. That's how they coordinate attacks across light years without communication lag. Kvex realized. My people are telepathic, but the range is naturally limited to a few meters. With this enhancement, a new data file opened on Maya's screen. Project Prometheus. The latest experiments show they can weaponize the enzyme to completely dominate the minds of other species. A distant explosion rocked the facility. Imperial reinforcements. Eliza warned. We need to move. Wait. Jackson examined a sealed container of glowing blue liquid. The synthesized enzyme. If they're using it to enhance their telepathy, we could reverse engineer it. To do what? Kvex asked. To disrupt it, Jackson replied, his eyes gleaming with possibility. Break their coordination completely. Eliza made a swift decision. Free the captives. Download the data. Take the samples. As alarms blared throughout the facility, they guided the disoriented human captives toward the shuttle bay. Imperial forces converged from all directions, but the newly freed prisoners, desperate for escape, fought with unexpected ferocity. They launched with seconds to spare, the largest Imperial armada they'd yet encountered closing in rapidly. The pursuit ships fired warning shots across their bow, herding them toward the Cherid-Diz asteroid storm, a section of the labyrinth so dense and chaotic that no ship had successfully navigated it. They're trying to force us to surrender, Maya observed. Or die trying, Kvex added grimly. Eliza took manual control of the vessel. Neither option works for me. She guided their ship into the storm, using techniques she had developed secretly during her Imperial training. The pursuing ships that attempted to follow were destroyed one by one against the violently spinning rocks, their formations breaking apart without the precision their hive-mind coordination usually provided. When they emerged on the other side, a message waited from Admiral Kenzo. Return to Sanctuary immediately. We have a plan. For the first time, the Resistance began to believe they might actually win. The Cerulean Nebula shimmered like a vast ocean suspended among the stars, its swirling gases naturally disrupting Imperial scanning technology. Hidden within its luminous folds, the rogue planet Sanctuary had become home to the largest gathering of Resistance forces in galactic history. In the grand chamber of what had once been an ancient temple, representatives from 53 formerly subjugated species gathered in what became known as the First Council of Free Worlds. The chamber hummed with dozens of languages, translation drones hovering above the delegates. Admiral Kenzo stood at the center, his voice carrying across the assembly. For the first time, we have confirmation of the cell-foreign homeworld's coordinates. For centuries, this information was their most closely guarded secret. Maya projected a holographic map that displayed a star system deep within the galactic core, surrounded by layers of defensive arrays. Their home system is protected by the largest concentration of Imperial forces ever assembled. A direct assault would be suicide. Perhaps not. Kvex stepped forward, his presence still causing murmurs among those who distrusted any cell-foreign, even one who had proven his loyalty repeatedly. My species relies on our hive mind for coordinated military actions. If we could disrupt that connection, even temporarily. Jackson had spent weeks studying the enzyme samples recovered from Erebus, barely sleeping as he modified the compound in his makeshift laboratory. The synthesized enzyme enhances their telepathic abilities, but with these modifications, it should create a cascading neural disruption, like static overwhelming a communication channel. How would we deploy it? Asked a Brennan delegate, her translucent skin shifting with skepticism. The enzyme is most effective as an aerosol, Jackson explained. If we could introduce it into the atmosphere of Cell 4 Prime. Arguments erupted across the chamber. Some insisted on immediate action, while Imperial forces were still reeling from the Tartarus breakout. Others advocated caution, warning that a failed attack on the XL foreign homeworld would doom the Resistance forever. Admiral Kenzo raised his hand for silence. We need a strategy that doesn't rely on brute force. The Empire still outnumbers us 1,000 to 1. Divide and conquer, Eliza said quietly, but with enough authority that the chamber fell silent. We force them to scatter their fleet by creating simultaneous crises across multiple sectors. A communication alert interrupted the debate. Maya's expression darkened as she checked the incoming transmission. Imperial broadcast on all frequencies. They're making sure everyone sees this. The holographic projector shifted to show Executor Dravkor, the resistance symbol still visible as a scar on his chest plate. By decree of the Supreme XL Foreign, I have been appointed Fleet Master of the Imperial Armada. My first act is to announce that the human homeworld, Earth, will serve as an example of imperial justice. In 7 standard days, the planet will be subject to resource extraction using our most advanced technology. Those humans who survived the initial conquest of Earth centuries ago will not survive this. The transmission ended, leaving stunned silence in its wake. He's baiting us, Kivek warned, drawing us into a trap. Of course he is, Eliza replied, and we're going to use that. In the days that followed, a daring plan took shape. Resistance cells across the galaxy would launch simultaneous uprisings, forcing the Empire to spread its forces thin. Meanwhile, the main Alliance fleet would prepare for a direct assault on XL4 Prime itself. On the eve of deployment, Eliza found Jackson on an observation platform, staring at the nebula that concealed them. "We might not survive this," he said quietly. "Does that scare you?" Her answer surprised him. "What scares me is the thought that 1,000 years from now, no one will remember why we fought. Not for revenge, but for the right of every species to determine their own destiny." Throughout the night, the vast fleet assembled in the shadow of the nebula. Ships of every design and origin, crewed by beings united only by their desire for freedom, prepared for what might be their final mission. As the first light of the distant star touched the fleet, a simple message was transmitted to resistance cells across the galaxy. The sword is drawn. XL4 Prime appeared on the Defiance's view screens as a glittering sapphire jewel, encircled by the most formidable defense fleet ever assembled. Thousands of Imperial warships formed concentric rings around the homeworld, their formations precise and unwavering. On the bridge of the flagship, Eliza studied the tactical display. Status report. All systems operational, Maya confirmed from her station, fingers dancing across the interface. The enzyme dispersal units are ready. Resistance cells report uprisings underway on 117 worlds. Admiral Kenzo nodded approvingly. The Imperial fleet is responding exactly as predicted. They've dispatched 40% of their forces to quell the rebellions. That still leaves thousands of ships between us and the planet, Jackson observed grimly. Kivek stepped forward, his tall frame silhouetted against the stars. The home fleet will be rotating shifts precisely 14 minutes from now. There will be a momentary disruption in their defense pattern. Eliza had staked everything on this moment. The knowledge that even the mighty Empire relied on routines and protocols that created brief, exploitable vulnerabilities. "All ships, prepare for hyperspace jump on my mark," she commanded. Target coordinates locked. 3, 2, 1. Execute. The Alliance fleet, 300 ships of various sizes and designs, tore through the fabric of space, emerging directly behind the outer defense ring during the precise moment of shift change. Before the Imperial forces could regroup, Jackson's modified enzyme warheads detonated in the upper atmosphere, releasing a colorless, odorless compound that began to disrupt the XL Foreign's telepathic coordination. The effect was immediate and devastating. Imperial ships broke formation, some colliding with each other as their synchronized movements faltered. Across the command channels, Maya intercepted confused communications as the Imperial officers struggled to coordinate without their hive mind advantage. "It's working," she exclaimed. "Their formations are breaking down." "All ships, engage according to assigned targets," Admiral Kenzo ordered. "Ground assault teams, prepare for deployment." Eliza led the strike team aboard a stealth shuttle, using the chaos of the space battle as cover to slip through the planetary defense grid. Maya's team of hackers had penetrated the automated systems, turning defense weapons against their own controllers. The shuttle touched down in the capital city's central district. As they emerged, the team witnessed something unexpected. Ordinary Excelforans joining the fight against their own military forces. The truth broadcasts, Kivex explained. Not all of my people support the Empire's methods. Many have been waiting for this moment. Fighting through the streets became a desperate room-by-room struggle. Former slaves rose up, joining the Alliance forces with makeshift weapons and centuries of suppressed rage. The Imperial Citadel loomed ahead, its crystalline spires reaching toward the smoke-filled sky. Inside the imposing structure, they battled elite guards through ornate corridors until they reached the towering throne room where the Council of 12 had ruled for millennia. Only two figures remained. The Supreme Excelforan, ancient and wizened on his floating throne, and Executor Dravkor, standing protectively before his master. I expected a monster, Eliza said, looking at the ancient ruler, but you're just afraid. The Supreme Excelforan's eyes, clouded with age, focused on her. We conquered out of fear, human. Our species lives for centuries. Yours for mere decades, yet in that brief span, you accomplish what takes us generations. Our oldest prophecies warned that the short-lived ones would one day rule the stars, for they value each moment more fiercely. You slaughtered billions because of a prophecy, Jackson asked incredulously. We became what we feared, the ruler admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Dravkor drew his weapon with a snarl, charging toward Eliza. Their final duel played out before the ancient throne, former lovers using moves they had once taught each other. When she finally subdued him, forcing him to his knees, the expectation of death showed clearly in his eyes. Instead, she turned to the Supreme Excelforan. Here are our terms: the dissolution of the Empire, the establishment of a galactic confederation where all species have equal representation, and a full accounting of all crimes committed in the name of imperial expansion. Outside, the sounds of battle began to fade as news spread of the Council's surrender. In orbit, imperial ships stood down one by one as their command structure collapsed. Days later, as representatives from hundreds of worlds gathered to sign the Galactic Charter, Eliza stood at the edge of the ceremonial hall. Was it worth it? Admiral Kenzo asked, joining her. She watched as humans, Selforans, and dozens of other species mingled freely for the first time in centuries. Ask me in 100 years, she replied with a small smile. The story of the Unstoppable became the founding legend of a new galactic era, one where humanity's greatest strength proved to be not our technology or even our determination, but our capacity to fight for something larger than ourselves. The freedom of all sentient beings to chart their own course among the stars.